Good morning, beloveds. Welcome to Unity. I'm going to start this morning with our reading from our new book of the month, The Healing Power of Humans. The Healing Power of Humans. The Healing Power of Humor, and listen to the subtitle of this book, if you will. Techniques for Getting Through Loss, Setbacks, Upsets, Disappointments, Difficulties, Trials, Tribulations, and all that not so funny stuff. I am reading from page 21. If I have learned anything thus far in my 50 years, it is to trust life's processes. Bad things, as a bestseller has told us, happen to good people. I do not know why, nor does anyone else, but one thought has comforted me in my dark times. I have a deep belief that everything contributes to a larger, more logical picture than I can see at any given moment. When I can find some humor in my discomforts, I begin to see this larger picture. It expands my vision and helps me look forward instead of backward. Humor, in the darkest of places, is a sign of emergence. It is an indication that I am beginning to embrace life and that healing is taking place. The pain in your life comes from many places. Sometimes its source is mundane. An egg drops to the floor and it breaks. Other times, the source is more profound. We receive a Dear John or a Dear Jane letter and our heart breaks. Whatever our hurt, there is a big difference between pain and suffering. Our pain may not cease, but humor, our pain may not cease, but humor can minimize our suffering by giving us power in what appears to be a powerless situation. I'm going to read through today's affirmation. Seeing the funny side of life comes naturally to me. Laughter transforms me and transforms any situation I find myself in. I refuse to take anything too seriously, and I always remember, if it's going to be funny later, it's funny now. And so it is. Please stand and join me with conviction. Seeing the funny side of life comes naturally to me. Laughter transforms me and transforms any situation I find myself in. I refuse to take anything too seriously, and I always remember, if it's going to be funny later, it's funny now. And so it is. Right? How did that video make you feel? How did the song make you feel? Thank you, Mickey. Terrific. Groovy. I'm feeling groovy. How does it make you feel to see people enjoy? Why do you think it works that way? Apparently something greater than we are has an idea about this. Why do you feel lighter and more joyful listening to songs like Feeling Groovy and watching people laugh at themselves on the subway? Really? That was 1 minute and 14 seconds long. It took a minute and 14 seconds to move us in consciousness from wherever we were to at least some sense of joy and ease and grace. So there's kind of a way of being in the world that has a frown attached to it. Everybody, give me a frown. Give me your best frown. I mean, it even shows up in our faces. It's narrow and it's compressed. And it kind of makes us feel tighter in here. You're so cute. Now give me a smile. Give me your best smile. Like really, open your mouth. You know, like, oh my God, life is so good. And there's a sense of expansion and availability and openness. How do we feel when we are all like this? And when we are all like this, we feel differently, don't we? And you know what? A thought plus a feeling equals what? A result. A thought plus a feeling equals a result. This is the creative process in us. And I don't know about you, but when I get all like, next thing you know, I'm thinking thoughts that support, right? And that thought plus that feeling equals an experience in the world or a result. You know, in this video, there's one woman I love. She is determined not to laugh. And then she kind of like, when she starts, finally the corners of her mouth turn up a little bit because she can't help herself, right? And she kind of like looks annoyed with her eyes while her mouth is, you know, she's kind of looking this way with her eyes while her mouth is starting to turn up. Yes? See, we get so determined to be in our stuck place, we don't even let something as simple as joy open our hearts more fully to the presence of the divine and to the presence of the divine in all things and in all places and in all people. We get very attached to feeling about things or about life, don't we? Our theme this year is living in the Spirit. And our theme this month is in the spirit of joy, living in the spirit of joy. How can we cultivate this experience of just ease and grace and laughter and joy, even in the dark places? Because there are dark places in our lives, right? And yet, as we learn from our reading, and as perhaps you know from your experience of life, when we can embody and embrace joy in the dark places, suddenly we start to what? Radiate joy. And if we want to live a life that is fulfilling and anchored in the Spirit of God, it must be anchored in the spirit of the joy that is of the nature of God. We have to keep our minds on thoughts of happiness and joy. See, then it produces kind of a natural cheerfulness, doesn't it? When we do that, it simply unfolds. And so living in the spirit of joy is our theme all month long. We want to learn to radiate joy, that quality of God, at all times and in all places and in all ways, even out of the darkness, we can radiate joy. And it doesn't always mean, joy doesn't mean we're always laughing, right? I can rest in quiet joy in the face of the perfection of all life at a time of deep loss. And maybe I'm not laughing in that moment, but I'm anchored in a bigger idea of life and love and joy and peace, the infinite divine. Because all things are contained in that one body of God, right? Even the losses, even the pain, even the suffering, it's all contained in the oneness of the infinite. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I got told things like, wipe that smile off your face. Yeah? And get serious. You need to get serious, young lady. Anybody have stuff like that? Or whatever the message was for you, I began to think everything is serious, or I won't be taken seriously if I'm not serious. And somehow in my mind, the idea of laughter and joy and ease and grace and serious got like they were two different things, do you see? And being serious and taking life seriously can be filled with joy and laughter and ease and grace. And I can still be known as someone who takes life seriously because, some things are serious, aren't they? A lot of things in life are very serious. We need to take them seriously, but we can do that with a sense of lightness and a sense of perfection and a sense of the allness of God, with a sense of grace and with a sense of humor. Here's a kind of a story from my family. My grandfather passed away, I think it was November, and it was almost 20 years ago now. But it was a big loss for my family. He was the patriarch of my family. He was a big personality. We all loved him so much, and it was a big loss when he died. And when my mother went to pick up his ashes from the mortuary, she's holding them and she's being with them, and she's like, and I don't know what to do with you. You know, he said he wanted to be cremated, but he didn't say anything about the disposal of his ashes. So she didn't really know what to do, so she put them in the trunk of her car and she left the mortuary. And there he sat. And my grandfather rolled around in the trunk of my mother's car for the next 9 months or so. And frankly, I had kind of forgotten about it. She had mentioned it that day when she picked his ashes up, and then I had kind of forgotten about it. So, you know, the next July, we're at the family reunion at the park, and there's 20 or 25 of us, and we're all around in lawn chairs and visiting, and we're reminiscing about my grandfather, and Papa this and Papa that and Papa the other thing. And my mother says, he's in the trunk, you know. And my 9-year-old at the time niece kind of shook her head and she said, well, you know, Papa never missed a family reunion. 9 years old. And what was absolutely hysterical is all at once, all of our heads turned to the parking lot. And we were like, yeah. And so do you see how this is an experience that's deep and profound, but we're sitting around at the family reunion, you know, roasting marshmallows and laughing about the fact that Papa's been rolling around in the trunk for 9 months. Now, there's a part B to this story, because a few years later, later that day, we did take him up to the old Pioneer Cemetery, and we buried him next to his mom, which wasn't quite legal, but shh. Can we edit that out of the recording? That'd be good. But a few years later, my stepfather died, and he and my mom had been divorced for quite a few years, and my mom was remarried. But he was still of our family. He was still part of our family. And once again, my mother went to the mortuary, and she picked up his ashes, and she put him in the trunk, and she got home. And her then husband, my stepdad, said, so what'd you do with the ashes? And she said, he's in the trunk. And he said, if you think your ex-husband is rolling around in the trunk for the next 9 months, I have got news for you. So we moved a little more quickly in this case. But my point is, something as serious as the loss of 2 people important in my family, you know, we were able to be with it with a sense of lightness and a sense of humor, embracing that quiet quality of joy, appreciating who they were and what they brought to our family. And no small part of what they brought to our family was joy. And so we're just continuing to embody the gift of joy that they gave us by being lighthearted and joking, but at the same time, it's part of the grieving, yes? We can be both serious and joy-filled at the same time. We can embody the God quality of joy. See, this is true maturity. Wipe that smile on your face, get serious, young lady. That's not maturity. That's pretend. That's pretend. True maturity is being able to stand in the face of life's challenge with a sense that the infinite presence is always with me and all is well. And I can be in joy, even in the dark of this situation. Now, you know, is it enough to just say, hey, cheer up, be happy? That's not what I'm saying. And the answer to that question, is it enough to just say, cheer up, be happy? The answer is yes and no. There is a sense in which it is enough. And there's a sense in which it, oh, so not is not enough. You could not have said, cheer up, be happy, when my grandfather passed away, yes? But do you know how you say, oh, cheer up, be happy, is you have a 9-year-old say, he's never missed a family reunion. Right? Do you see how that's saying, lift, lift. And a child shall lead them, right? A 9-year-old took us there. How precious and beautiful is that? You know, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., and I visited the Vietnam War Memorial. And it was a very deep experience. I was there with a friend who had actually served during that time, and it was a deep experience for me, and I wasn't there, right? But my friend who had served during that time was really having a moment, and just allowing him to be in the pain of that moment. Does that make sense? We have to allow ourselves to be in the pain of the moment, to shed the tears. And you know, while we were there, I looked up, do you remember POW bracelets? In the 70s and 80s, I wore a POW bracelet, and I was able to find the name of the man, the bracelet that I wore. And it was such a moment, and it was painful to connect with the loss, to connect with the darkness of that time, to connect with the idea that this man whose bracelet I wore had a wife and kids somewhere, to connect with the idea that this person that I'm with, that I love, is experiencing deep pain in this moment. And then we went out and had a drink and told jokes, right? And laughed. We just had such a lovely time. A bunch of us all went out together, sitting in some bar in Washington, D.C., laughing. Do you see how the joy helps us process the pain? And when we're willing to be in the presence of that, when we're willing to feel all of our feelings, did you hear that? When we're willing to feel the pain and the lightness, and not separate them and make them different, but recognize that this is the spectrum of human emotion, and we've been given these emotions for a reason. We're created in the image and likeness of the infinite. And darkness and light are both part of the human experience, so that we can grow, so that we can evolve, so that we can open more fully to the spiritual truth of who we are. I don't know if you've noticed, but the creation is a funny place. The world is a funny place, isn't it? I mean, look at giraffes. Seriously. Have you seen that sloth video? This sloth crossing the street is the funniest thing I've ever seen. The world is a funny place. Somebody said to be human is to be a latent fool. Our choice is whether we're going to be practicing fools. See, latent, covered up, unexpressed, practicing. Go stand in a subway and laugh and not care what anybody thinks of you. And they may or may not join in. But if we can understand that the world is a funny place, Bo Lazoff, you may have heard of him. He's the director of the Human Kindness Foundation. He says, I didn't laugh much when I was an angry radical in the 60s. And when I was a naive New Age seeker in the early 70s, I was never sure what was okay or not okay to laugh at. Now that I'm not so angry or frightened, not only do I laugh a lot, but it turns out I have much more political and spiritual influence than I ever did in those joyless years. Ain't that a hoot? God's best jokes are all around us. Look at the great sums of money curly-haired people spend to straighten their hair, while straight-haired people are spending their bucks on perms. Or the millions of dollars that are spent so the Pope can visit the poor. We are crazy as loons, struggling for illusions we can never get on a planet that just doesn't support the style of life we try so hard to create. As the great cartoonist Wilson once said, life essentially doesn't work, and that is the basis of endless humor. You see, creation is a funny place. The world provides all the irony we could possibly want, yes? What we provide is the attitude. How will we be with it? How will we be with the fact that we live in a crazy place that is unpredictable, that is filled with pain, that is filled with joy? Our attitude provides the opportunity to learn and grow, to rest in joy, or to shrink and foster more pain. I like to think sometimes of my sense of humor as my opportunity to take the God's eye view of the universe. Because, sometimes I think, when I get into this mistaken idea of God as a guy sitting in a chair up there, I know that's not what God is. But one of the ways I see that, when I do cultivate that image, is he's just up there sniggering like crazy, like, look at them now. Oh my God. What a riot they are. They're so funny. They take everything so seriously. I've given them so much opportunity for joy. I've given them so much opportunity to notice and see the ironies of life. Can I lift myself to a higher altitude, the altitude of joy, God quality joy, and see joy in all things? Are you ready for some of that? What are you willing to do this week? What are you willing to laugh at? What have you been taking oh so seriously? And in the awareness that if it's going to be funny later, it's funny now. I'll never forget, this was a really big deal to me. I was picking up the new boyfriend at the airport for the first time. I wanted to make an impression. I cleaned my car, right? This was in the days when you could go meet the plane at the gate, right? Cleaned the car, I dressed real nice, makeup was perfect. We'd only been going out for a month or so. I'm going to pick him up at the airport. I dash in, I stop at the restroom. I turn to hit the flush thing, and my keys fall out of my pocket and go down and are flushed away. In SeaTac Airport. I came unglued. My car's in the SeaTac parking lot. I lived in Ballard. The closest keys are in Ballard. I don't have anybody in Ballard who can bring them to me. His flight's going to be here any minute. Mr. Perfect is going to be coming off the plane. And I am looking good. But I'm going to have to say, honey, could we just go have a drink in the bar? And he's going to say, no, I want to go home. And I'm going to say, well, about that. And my sister lived in Federal Way. And then, you had to use payphones, too. You couldn't just pick up your phone, right? I had to call my sister in Federal Way, beg her. I had to beg her to drive to Ballard, to go to my landlord's first, get a key, then drive to my apartment, get into my apartment, get the extra spare set of keys and drive them back to SeaTac. Well, that's a 2-hour thing for her to do all of that. I'm like, no, really, honey, just one drink. Let's just go. Welcome home, dear. And I was mortified. And I wanted to be seen as together, and I wanted to be taken seriously. I was so committed to being seen in a certain way. I couldn't even say, oh my God, you're never going to believe what I did. I flushed the keys down the toilet. Isn't that hysterical? I couldn't do that because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know that I belonged to something greater. And if he can't have a sense of humor about flushing your darn keys down the toilet, then to heck with him. He's not worth it, right? Today's upset is tomorrow's laugh, if we're willing to see it that way. And if it's going to be funny later, it can be funny now. What are you willing to do this week? What are you willing to have be funny now? Rather than tying up your not enoughness in a need to be upset. What are you willing to do differently this week to allow it to flow in the ease and perfection and the allness of the joy that is the mind and the heart and the body of God? So let's turn within and affirm joy, infinite joy. The joy that is the source of all creation, the joy that lifts our hearts, the joy that breathes us. It is right where we are. We cannot be separate from this joy, and in every moment and every day, we open our hearts more and more fully to the infinite joyful presence of God. We recognize that external circumstance has no power over us, that we are the deciders and the beers of our own lives. And so we simply say yes to an attitude of joy and allow it to lift us in consciousness, allow it to lift us into the God mind regarding all situations, all conditions, all things that might seem to limit us. We simply allow joy to permeate our awareness, our being, our lives. And we know that in the stillness and in the dark places, joy. And we know that in the light and in the easy spots, joy. We simply allow ourselves to have fun with life. We become practicing fools, practicing joy, practicing ease, practicing grace, allowing ourselves to express effortlessly the beingness that God is. Seeing the funny side of life comes naturally to me. I am at one with the infinite. I know that I am supported. I know that I am loved. I know that I am love. God is good and all is well, and we leave this place emboldened in our ability to be the presence of joy in the world. And I give thanks for it, and I call it good. And so it is. Amen.